The sky over Petra cracked with the jagged light of a sudden storm, its roar rolling through the valleys like a warning. I stood at the mouth of the tent, rain slicing against the canvas in violent sheets, and felt the sting of each drop on my exposed skin. The wind howled through the narrow alleys of stone, carrying whispers that seemed to echo the doubts buried in my mind. I couldn't help but smirk at the irony of it all. Here I was, Thomas Hale, once respected in my field, now reduced to a madman with a shovel and a notebook, searching for ghosts in a city of stone. They had called me obsessive, delusional, but I knew that Petra held secrets. Secrets that could rewrite history if only I could find them. Lightning illuminated the city's red-hued cliffs, and in that flicker, I saw something that sent a chill crawling up my spine. There, half hidden behind a mound of ancient rubble, was a fissure in the rock face, a dark line that had never been marked on any map I'd studied. My pulse quickened as I snatched the lantern from the table, its cold metal biting into my palm. The storm raged behind me as I crossed the uneven ground, boots splashing through mud and slick stone. Each step echoed in the heavy air, a drumbeat that matched the thundering in my chest. When I reached the fissure, the wind seemed to quiet, as if holding its breath. The entrance was a narrow tear in the sandstone, just wide enough for a man to squeeze through. I leaned in, lantern held aloft, casting a warm glow over the ancient carvings that flanked the opening. Symbols I'd never seen before, not quite Nabatean, not quite anything I recognized, spiraled along the edge like an invitation or a warning. Sliding through the narrow gap, I felt the cold embrace of stone on either side, pressing in as if it wanted to keep me there. The lantern's light trembled with each uncertain step, casting sharp shadows on the walls. I could hear the drip of water somewhere deep within, a sound that resonated in the back of my mind like a ticking clock. The walls were smoother here, polished almost to a sheen, and I traced my fingers along the carvings as I walked. They told stories of celestial beings descending from the sky, their bodies stretched and segmented like ancient machines. Human figures reached up to meet them, faces painted in expressions that teetered between reverence and terror. The mosaics shifted subtly as the light moved, the gold flecks embedded in the stone catching and reflecting the flame's glow. "This is it," I whispered, voice barely more than a breath. This was the proof I needed, a tale hidden not in scrolls or manuscripts, but carved into Petra's very bones. The tunnel opened suddenly into a vast chamber, the ceiling disappearing into darkness high above. The lantern's light seemed swallowed by the sheer size of the room, but what it revealed was enough to steal the breath from my lungs. Mosaics covered every surface, interlocking depictions of celestial beings entwined with human forms, their bodies fused in grotesque, unimaginable ways. The patterns glistened, the blue and gold tiles catching and refracting the flame's glow in a way that made them appear to move. At the center of the room, embedded in a wall of polished black stone, was the gate. It was circular, nearly 10 feet across, formed of metallic gears that intertwined with an artistry beyond anything ancient man should have been capable of. Runes glowed faintly along its edges as if they had been waiting for me. The metal was cold, sending a shiver down my arm. I pressed my fingers against one of the symbols, a star split in half by an ornate line. Suddenly, the room shook as a grinding sound filled the chamber. The runes brightened, and a metallic voice echoed around me, deep and inhuman. "The first key has been found." I stumbled back, the lantern slipping from my grasp and clattering to the floor. Its light sputtered and flared, casting shadows that seemed to reach for me. The air thickened, heavy and stifling, pressing down on my chest. I glanced at the entrance to the chamber, where darkness now pooled like ink. A cold wind swept past, carrying with it a sound that set my teeth on edge. A whisper just at the threshold of hearing. It spoke no language I knew, but its intent was unmistakable. I was no longer alone. Fear bloomed sharp and acidic in my gut, cutting through the exhilaration that had driven me here. This was no lost relic, No simple artifact to be catalogued and preserved. It was a sentinel, a guardian of something far older and more dangerous than I had ever imagined. As the wind shifted again, the whispers intensified, joined by the skittering scrape of stone against stone. My breath quickened, each gasp shallow and panicked. I grabbed the lantern and turned it toward the sound. The flame wavered, illuminating nothing but empty space and shadows that rippled like water. "Get a hold of yourself, Hale," I muttered, the sound of my voice grounding me for a moment. But deep down I knew that whatever I had awakened, it would not be so easily dismissed. With a shaking hand, I reached for my notebook, its leather cover worn and familiar, and began to scrawl a frantic entry. I needed to document this, even if no one would believe me. The words came fast and disjointed. Mosaics, celestial beings, the gate, first key. As I wrote, the lantern's light dimmed, flickering as though something unseen was devouring it. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed the room was a glint of movement. 2 pinpricks of reflected light, watching from the corner where the shadows ran deepest. I wasn't alone, and whatever shared that chamber with me was no longer content to stay hidden. The darkness pressed in on me, swallowing my breath, my thoughts. The faint glow of the lantern dwindled, and I knew, deep in my bones, that something had changed. Something ancient had stirred in the hidden chamber beneath Petra. My body felt heavy, like I was standing at the bottom of the ocean, the weight of 1,000 years pressing down. The voice repeated itself, metallic and hollow, echoing through the chamber. "The first key has been found." This time it almost seemed to speak directly into my mind, bypassing my ears. The whispers that had lurked at the edge of my senses became clearer. Not words exactly, but intentions, thoughts conveyed in a guttural hiss that clawed at my sanity. I stumbled back from the gate, breathing hard, my eyes darting to the shadows. I could feel a presence hidden just beyond the limits of the lantern's light. There was no sound but the erratic pulse of my own breath, and yet the whispers filled my ears, urging me deeper, coaxing me to step forward. The edges of the room felt incredibly far now, as if the walls had shifted, bending space itself. I forced myself to swallow my fear, to regain control. I was an academic, a historian, not a man to be frightened by dark corners. The rational part of me tried to reason, tried to attribute the whispers to echoes in the ancient cavern, to my own sleep-deprived mind playing tricks. But reason failed as I saw those pinpricks of light, eyes reflecting in the darkness, staring back at me. I backed away, my lantern swinging wildly, its light illuminating flashes of stone mosaics, ancient, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. The depictions seemed to move under the flickering glow, celestial beings twisted in agony as they merged with the humans below, their forms becoming grotesque, mechanical, almost insect-like. And there, at the edge of the light, the shadow shifted again. My breath caught as I watched it condense, the darkness coalescing into something almost tangible. A figure took form, vaguely human-shaped, the edges of it blurring like smoke. Its face was obscured, but those reflective eyes shone with a calculating intent. It moved. Not walking, not gliding, but something in between, a jerking, fluid motion that made my stomach turn. The whispers rose to a crescendo, pounding inside my head, and I felt my legs weaken beneath me. Panic set in. My instincts told me to run, but the chamber, the only path I knew, seemed impossibly far, the entrance swallowed by the dark. The figure was closer now, close enough that I could feel the chill emanating from it, a cold that seemed to suck the warmth from the air. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a loose stone, and I fell hard, my head snapping back against the floor. Pain exploded behind my eyes, and for a moment, the world went black. I must have lost consciousness for a second, maybe longer. When I opened my eyes, the lantern was lying beside me, flickering, casting skeletal shadows across the chamber. The whispers had dulled to a low murmur, like a conversation happening in another room, just out of earshot. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the metal of the lantern, and pulled it close, struggling to bring the world back into focus. I tried to push myself up, but something shifted in the darkness ahead. The figure, that shadow, it was still there. It hadn't moved while I was down, as if it were studying me, deciding what to do. The whispers began to form shapes in my mind, fleeting images of people, faces twisted in agony, a black sky filled with falling stars. A sensation like claws raked across my thoughts, something trying to get in. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to shut it out, to resist. I turned the lantern up as high as it would go, the sudden brightness cutting through the darkness, a harsh, almost angry glow that painted the chamber in stark relief. The shadows recoiled, retreating from the lantern's light, and the whispers turned into a screech of pure rage, echoing through the chamber like the howl of a wounded animal. I stood up, the lantern held out in front of me, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The figure was gone, but I could still feel it, the weight of its gaze lingering on me. I stumbled further into the chamber, trying to find some semblance of safety. Half buried in the dirt near the far wall was a book, old, its cover cracked and worn with age. I reached down, fingers brushing against the leather, and picked it up. The pages were brittle, yellowed, filled with handwritten notes, sketches of the same mosaics that adorned the walls. My eyes widened as I realized what I held. This journal belonged to someone like me, another historian, another seeker who had stood in this same place. But the handwriting changed as I flipped through the pages. What began as careful notes devolved into illegible scrawls. I held the journal close to the lantern, scanning the entries. The gate. Not of this world. Celestial beings, not gods, but prisoners. The words sent a chill through me. Prisoners. The beings depicted in the mosaics. Were they not gods descending to earth, but exiles cast down, contained here for a reason I couldn't yet understand? The lantern flickered, reminding me that I had limited time. I scanned further. The whispers. They know my name. They see my thoughts. The guardians. They are not alive, not dead. They are something in between, bound to this place. The handwriting became more erratic, the ink smudged in places as if the author had written in a frenzy. I must seal the gate. I must, before they cross into our world, before they consume me. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry, and forced myself to tear my eyes away from the journal. My mind spun with questions, each more terrifying than the last. Whoever had written this, they hadn't made it out. The journal was here, abandoned, and there was no sign of its author, only the whispers and the shadows that still moved. The lantern was dying, the light weakening. I had to move. My head throbbed from the fall, my vision still blurry at the edges, but I couldn't stay here. The gate loomed behind me, its runes now dark. I turned, stumbling back toward the tunnel I had come through, but my heart sank as I saw the entrance. The narrow gap in the stone was no longer there. In its place was a solid wall, as if the rock itself had shifted, sealing me inside. My hands shook as I ran them along the stone, feeling for any seam, any crack that might give way. There was nothing. Panic clawed at my throat, and I fought to keep it at bay. There had to be another way out. There had to be. I turned back to the chamber, eyes scanning the shadows, looking for anything. A passage I had missed, a hint of light that might lead to safety. The whispers began to rise again, louder now, angrier. I held the dying lantern up, its light barely enough to push back the dark. The shadows shifted and I could see them, dozens of those reflective eyes, watching. The chill deepened and I could feel my strength waning, my body trembling with exhaustion. The journal's words echoed in my mind. The gate is not a door. It is a mouth, and we are but whispers within it. The meaning sank in, a cold, dreadful realization. I had opened something that was never meant to be opened, and now whatever was on the other side wanted me. It wanted to consume me, to drag me into the darkness where it dwelled. The lantern sputtered, its light dwindling to a faint, flickering glow. barely holding back the darkness. The whispers surged, and I felt the cold touch of something brushing against my skin, a sensation like icy fingers closing around my wrist. My breath caught, and for a moment I felt the world tilt, the ground slipping away beneath me. I wasn't alone, and whatever shared this darkness with me had finally decided to act. The shadows pressed in from every side, their forms writhing and shifting like smoke, their eyes reflecting the dim, struggling light of my weakened lantern. I could feel their hunger, a deep, ancient need that sought to consume me, to pull me into their darkness. My back was against the cold stone of the gate, the runes now dark and lifeless. I had to fight. I couldn't let it end like this. I pushed myself up, reaching for the gate's mechanism. My fingers brushed against the carved metal, and I felt a pulse. The gate responded, a faint glow returning to the runes, and the shadows recoiled, their forms flickering as if they were being torn apart. I forced myself to focus, to push through the fear and the pain. My other hand tightened around the lantern, its weak light barely holding the darkness at bay. The whispers were overwhelming now, a cacophony of voices that spoke in a language I could not understand, yet their meaning was clear. They wanted me to fail. They wanted me to give in, to let the gate fall back into darkness, to let them claim me. I twisted the mechanism, feeling the gears shift beneath my hand. The gate responded, the runes glowing brighter, and the shadows let out a screech, a sound that tore through the air like a physical force. The shadows surged, their forms condensing into a single mass, a dark tide that crashed over me. The lantern was knocked from my hand, its light snuffed out as it hit the ground. Cold, oily coils wrapped around my arms, my legs pulling me away from the gate. I struggled, my muscles straining, but it was like fighting the ocean, a force too vast to be resisted. The shadows dragged me across the chamber, my back slamming against the wall. The cold stone seemed to give way, my body sinking into it as if the rock itself had turned to liquid. Panic clawed at my throat as I felt the stone close around me, my arms pinned to my sides, my legs trapped. The whispers became louder, no longer just a chorus but a single voice, deep and resonant, speaking directly into my mind. You are the key. You are the guardian. The words struck me deeply, and I understood. I had never been meant to uncover the gate. I had never been meant to escape. I was not the first to stand in this chamber, to awaken the shadows, and I would not be the last. The truth crashed over me like a wave, and I saw those who had come before. Historians, explorers, seekers of knowledge, each one drawn here by the promise of secrets hidden beneath the ancient city. Each one consumed, transformed, made part of the gate. The stone closed around my chest, my neck, until only my face remained free. I could feel the cold seep into my bones, my body no longer my own. The shadows moved through me, into me, their essence merging with mine. My thoughts twisted, my memories unraveling, replaced by something older, something vast and unknowable. I was becoming part of the gate. I could feel the ancient mechanism, the gears and runes, the power that pulsed beneath the stone. I was no longer just a man. I was something more, something eternal. A guardian bound to this place, to this purpose. The whispers that had once filled the chamber now filled my mind, a constant presence that spoke of duty, of sacrifice. My vision warped, the chamber dissolving as my senses shifted, expanding. I could feel the walls of the chamber, the weight of the stone above and below. I could feel the gate, the runes glowing with a blue light. I could feel the presence of the shadows, no longer separate from me but a part of me, their thoughts intertwining with mine. And I could feel the passage of time. Days, months, years, they stretched out before me, an endless line of moments that blurred together. I was aware of the world above, of the city of Petra, of the people who came and went, unaware of what lay beneath their feet. I was aware of the gate, of its purpose, of the power it held back. I had become the guardian. It was my duty to protect the gate, to ensure that it remained closed, that the shadows remained contained. I could feel the weight of that duty, the inevitability of it. There was no escape, no end. Only the vigil, the endless watch over the gate, and the darkness it held. And then I heard footsteps, echoing through the tunnel. A flicker of light, a lantern held by a figure that stepped into the chamber. I felt a pang of recognition, a memory of what I had once been. An explorer, a seeker of knowledge, drawn by the promise of secrets hidden in the dark. The whispers rose, a chorus that filled the chamber, and I felt my voice join them, the words echoing through the stone, through the darkness. The first key has been found.